Welcome to the Boosted Volunteer Podcast. We share the stories of dedicated Booster Club volunteers and the tools and strategies they use to run successful booster clubs. We also have sought-out experts on fundraising, volunteer management, and running nonprofits to share best practices. Hosted by Robin Eissler and Evan Eissler, you won't want to miss these great episodes that will help you run your booster club like a champ.
Welcome to the Boosted Volunteer. Today we have Jennifer Martin, who is the president of New Braunfels High School Marching Band, the Marching Unicorns. She is also a consultant for Gourmet Texas, a specialty candy company. And most importantly, she's a dedicated band mom of 2 boys. Welcome, Jennifer. We're really glad to have you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, how long have you been with the New Braunfels? I love the unicorn boosters. And how did you get started?
Well, we have a couple of names, the NBHS Band Boosters or the MUB, the Mighty Unicorn Band, as we've been known before. I got started about 3 years ago. My senior this year started, his freshman year was during COVID. And so that was an extremely challenging year. So there wasn't a lot going on in the senses of boostering or getting together or events or any of that. So it really started his sophomore year. It's so funny. I did one booster meeting, which was over Zoom, and a friend of mine was on the board. It was the finishing up his freshman year. And she came on the chat and said, "Hey, will you join the board?" So that's how it started.
You got to be careful attending those booster clubs.
I know. Just don't look in the chat, especially if there's Zoom. Just don't make eye contact and don't look in the chat. That's how that works. Anyway, so I started, right, that was in May, because that's usually when we do our show announcement. So that's why we were on to find out what the show was for the next year. And it just started up from there.
Exciting. So you're currently president. What other roles have you served?
So I'm president this year. And so to the 2 years prior, I was secretary. So I did 2 years of secretary, and my things that I managed or the categories that I covered the first year, of course, coming out of COVID, it was pretty minimal. But one of the things I took on also almost immediately was band meals. So we provide meals for the band for pre-games, depending on the game day, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. So we do a pre-game meal for them. And then we also, depending on the competition or how far away the game is, we've had 3 games this year that were over 2 hours away. And so we provide meals before they come home. We provide snacks. We provide all sorts of things like that. So I was managing the meals the last 3 years as well. But I started that his sophomore year when it was about, I think it was 160 to 170 is how many I was feeding a week. Second year, it was about 220. And this past year, it was 250.
Wow. And that's 250 kids in the band, color guard, and all of that.
Exactly. So that's what I've done. A lot of different things. I've managed so many different events that are with boosters. I have a history before I was a candy rep. Many, many years ago, I worked in sports. I worked at SMU in the ticket office. I actually ran the ticket office for a couple of years. And so I have event background quite extensively. And so when I saw how crazy it was all and everybody was trying to do things they didn't feel comfortable doing, I have a natural inclination to step in and take over things to just make it a little bit easier on everybody because it's not that big of a struggle for me. So I did a lot of events, Bandapalooza and Band Picnic and Band Banquet and you name it. I probably had my hands in it, even starting that first year.
Well, having visited one of your events, I can tell that there's definitely a professional involved at some level because you guys run things so efficiently and so well. We came down to see your event, which was a big event. We'll talk about here in just a minute. What shocked us even more was how well run it was. It was just amazing. So
amazing parents. I will tell you, we've been so fortunate the last couple of years to have parents not only step up, but step up and take leadership roles. And we've been able to develop some great friendships, but also some abilities to grow on those relationships and to try and improve each of the events every year. We've been very, very fortunate.
You know, I made a series of notes when we came home from your event. One of the items on that list was delegating, was that you've done a tremendous job of delegating and having individual chairs for the events and then individual leads for each day and running across that team. It seemed to be one of the keys to your success because I think what I see a lot in booster clubs particularly is when a leader doesn't delegate, you lose volunteers because people like to be in charge of things. They like to manage things.
Absolutely. It's 100%. And we, fortunately, Wurstfest has been, what you were talking about, the event it's such a massive event or such a massive fundraiser for us that it's been very fine-tuned over the years in the senses of the management part of it. And the last couple of years really fine-tuned what worked, what didn't work, that kind of thing. So that was very much a group effort before me. This was my first year in Wurstfest. I had been a volunteer at the event, but I hadn't been in part of the setup or the application of all of it. But again, we've had amazing parents, the Schraders, who just step in and they know how to do stuff. They're smart, they're capable, they're hardworking. And there's so many times I have said, "You got this, right?" And they go, "Yep." I go, "Okay, then I'm out. So I'm going to let you do this." I say that a lot. That's one of my things is, if you need me, let me know. But otherwise, I'm out because I have other things to do. And you look like you got this. So delegating is essential because there's just too much. There's too much for one person to manage or to coordinate or any of that. And really, like you said, I think people are looking for ways to manage things, to have a say, to have a way to do things. And again, everybody is so bright and talented. Let's use them. Let's do it. Show us what you got. Let's have that opportunity for them.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know just in managing a business, it's so important. I find if I'm spending more than 10 minutes doing something as a leader of the organization, I'm always like, wait a second, this needs to be done by someone else. My job is to set the strategy, to create the vision, and find the people to execute. And if I'm executing for too long, I'm not doing my job. And I think the same applies to being president of a booster club.
100%. And that's getting bogged down in the details. We do struggle. We are a large band in comparison to other 6A schools in the state of Texas. We're not a huge band. We're probably pretty average. But the support coming out of COVID with the parents and has been a struggle for us. There were many years when that time frame became hard for people to come back from. It got very comfortable to change their systems, to change their volunteerism, to change what they were part of. And I totally respect that. It's just we need other people to venture out a little bit more. And so that's been one of the big instigations of me coming on this year, working with the directors as well as with the board that we have to incorporate more people. I want more communication. I want more information flowing. I want there to be a crossing of sharing of information. And that leads us to Booster Hub, which the chat today, I think we had 9 chats about a practice for the freshmen today. I don't have a freshman, so I don't know anything about the practice, but the parents are answering the questions and helping each other out and giving tidbits. And that is just so essential because otherwise they sit out there in no man's land and no one has an answer. So it's been an essential part, the communication, the inclusion, the bringing everybody up. We want everybody in, even if it's for a small amount. We need everybody to participate in some way.
That's really a great philosophy. As you said, communication is key. I mean, if you aren't talking to people, they don't know what's happening. And I think a lot of times too, when you're running a booster club, you get so head down in it and you just assume that everybody knows there's a giant fundraiser next week and everybody should be there. And then you have to roll back and go, nope, I need to tell them, and I need to tell them more than once because they're not going to hear it the first time I say it.
Yeah. And, I think that's an essential thing to keep in mind is when anything is happening, especially if you're in it, that's just your world. It's not everybody's world. And so trying to keep that information flowing for just the parent who's on the peripheral. I try to, after really big events, whether it's a season of marching or whether it's a competition or whether it's Bandapalooza or anything else, I try to communicate through our social media or through our Booster Hub app that even if you just drove your kid to practice today, that was essential, right? Even if you just made sure your kid got up and went to school today so that they could be at band practice, or you dropped off a horn, or you made them a lunch, or it does not matter. There's not this, you have to have done so many hours and doing specific things to be valued and a part of the process. And that's a big, huge thing for me because I think some of the parents who don't like the limelight, who don't like to be out in front of people, who introverted in nature, they don't want to have to mingle and meet and do all of those things. And just knowing that they're supporting their kid, that they're making sure that they get there, it's just as essential as anything else. 90% is showing up. Yeah. So we've got to celebrate those too, because I think those are the people who are looking and watching, and they want to see what's being personified by the group. What's important. And so maybe they'll step up in the next year or the next 2 years or whatever, but they've got to understand the importance of all parts of it.
And one of the things we did in our booster club is we defined all the roles and we published them. And I always made sure to have at least a couple that you never had to be present to do, that you could do them like behind the scenes. You could do them at any time, just for those people who like to contribute differently. But let people know, hey, if you can't come to the meetings or you don't want to come to the meetings or you don't want to do this, there's a role you can do. There's something that we need done that you can do off scene, you can take that out of the way.
Well, and, just a perfect example of that is we have opportunities with grants with different businesses in New Braunfels, but also national brands. And you have to fill out all these applications and you have to have all this information. And it's not really my strong suit. And I had a parent who messaged me and said, we just did this for another group. I feel really comfortable with this. How do you feel about me doing this? Yes, please. 100%. Yeah. Let's do it. And in fact, if you think of any other ones that we can apply for, whatever you need from me, you let me know and I'll provide it. But yes, please move forward. Because again, I don't even know about all those things because there's no time. There's management of what's going on. But those who are looking ahead or looking beyond what the immediate is are just as essential. You got to have the money to be able to support the kids. So it's just such an essential thing. Even those little things can turn into really big things over time.
Yeah, I think feedback and letting them know, what you need done is just critical to delegation, which is such a key, right? So it all ties into.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about Wurstfest. So Wurstfest is this 10 days to sausage, as they call it, in New Braunfels, Texas. I hope I got that right.
Yes.
And wow, so this is a huge event for you. It's like a $250,000 event for the band.
Absolutely.
How did it get started? Can you kind of explain how Wurstfest works, how it was kind of built to benefit nonprofits? I mean, it's a unique event in the city itself, and then it's a unique way that the band is tied into it. So I'd love to have you just give us an overview.
Sure. So Wurstfest is run by the Wurstfest Association, and it is a group, a nonprofit in New Braunfels that started back in 1961, where they started this 10-day salute to sausage. I think the first couple of times it wasn't as long, but the amount of time celebrating it grew over time. And the event is on city grounds in the middle of town, which is a fun, great area. It's not concrete or it's very personal, very New Braunfels. And so it's run every year. It's the first week. It starts the first Friday of November, and it's the next 10 days. They provide areas or booths that you can rent as a nonprofit to sell items that cannot be duplicated. So each booth itself or each nonprofit gets a location, whether it be a substantial or concrete building or a truck or booth that they bring in. They get an area. Some of them don't even have a full booth. It's just tables and set up. But you get a certain location that you rent usually every year, and you get to sell your wares, whether that's food, whether that's drink, whether that's hats, whether it's pins, whether it's all those things. Most of the time, each area or each booth is already designated by Wurstfest as to what they would sell. So if an organization lets go of a booth, the person that comes in or the group that comes in, they would take over that same item. There's not a lot of flux or play in those items because, again, there's no duplication. So if they were selling fried pickles, if you want that booth, you're going to sell fried pickles. It's just how it works. But there are also other businesses. There are restaurants around town that also have booths in there. That's getting to be a smaller and smaller amount. It's the largest part is nonprofits. But it's an opportunity to sell whatever you're selling for that year for 10 days. You do have specifications on times you have to be open and what it looks like. They do decide what things cost or how much you charge for them. And then they take a percentage, it varies a little bit, but they take a percentage off of your sales for the total event as the payment to be there. So it is one of the greatest and hardest and best and worst thing to be doing. It's estimated for the last 2 years, they're estimating between 350 and 500,000 people come in over the 10 days. Some days it feels like they all come one night. So there are a lot of people. It's a very large area, but all they're doing is listening to live music, playing games or carnival. And then there's beer and sausage and food. And buying stuff. That's pretty much what it is. And it's a 10-day festival to it.
And so the band, you guys are the official booth for merchandise at Wurstfest. Is that how it works?
That is, it is. We are considered the official booth for all merchandise for Wurstfest. And that is an unusual or unique setting in the senses of that we work with Wurstfest to get the design for the year. We coordinate with them on what the, I don't want to say seal, but what the design will be for the year. So each year, there are some specifications for what the logo has to have. And so we work with Wurstfest during the summer to get that design. And then we implement based on prior sales and new ideas, new ways for people to celebrate that. The biggest thing we do, or the most popular thing with Wurstfest, which is kind of, I guess, a unique thing. I didn't grow up here, but this having been my main, only huge festival, I don't have a lot of experience in Renaissance fairs and those type of things. But the unique thing about Wurstfest is there's hat pins. And so everybody goes and gets a hat pin for the year. And then if you've gone prior years and maybe you didn't have a hat before, you get prior year pins. But the goal is to have a pin for every year. And so the OPAs and OMAs, who are the nonprofit Wurstfest, they all wear them and wear dirndls and lederhosen for showing the German heritage. But we sell the official pin or hat pin for the year. And that's our biggest seller. It is something everybody wants. There are other pins, hat pins you can buy, but we're the official. And there is just this stigma around you have to have the official hat pin or the official merchandise. So we're fortunate enough to be able to sell it. We sell all sorts of things and it changes every year. Cups and shot glasses and sunglasses and shirts and sweatshirts and koozies. Koozies are a really big deal. We have cup koozies because the beer comes in plastic cups. And then we have also pitcher koozies because the beer comes in pitchers. So there's kind of unique things associated to it, but everything has to be official emblem for the year or the official one for the whole organization is what the product has to have on it.
And so just round numbers, you're selling something like 10,000 of these pins, correct?
Yeah. On an average year for the year it is in, we sell between 8,000 and 10,000 pins at $12 a piece. So you do the math, which is good math. But then, like I said, with all the other things that we sell, we try to have something for everyone because not everyone buys a hat pin. Not everybody has a hat. So we try to accommodate or to fill the niche for other things that people might want to buy. It's kind of a scramble every year in the senses of what's going to be the second thing, because it's always the pin is the most highest selling.
I'm just thinking, so you're ordering, you've got 10,000 of these pins, and let's just assume everything else is in the 1,000 number of things. So you're taking an all volunteer team, you're designing, ordering, selling, and staffing this for 10 days. And these are all volunteers.
100%. Yeah, it starts in July. We actually start the process in July. And from July until August, it's getting things approved, getting pricing done. Wurstfest is not really the word I'm looking for. It's a very traditional organization and it's run by a lot of volunteers themselves. They do have a couple of people in charge, but it's very non-computer oriented. So everything is, they mail you things, you drop things off, those kind of things. So it slows down the process a lot, which is not a negative. It's just that's the way they manage things. And so you really have to be on the ball once it starts because it's like a domino effect. It just goes and goes. I mean, it just picks up speed.
How do you rally and manage volunteers to staff a 10-day event? I mean, it's hard to get people to come out to work one evening at concessions, and you've got people for 10 days there every day, some days 12, 14-hour shifts.
Yeah, on the weekends, it's 10:30 a.m. until midnight. I mean, that's not one shift, but we have people during that entire time. It's, the really cool part about the Wurstfest is most people want to go. Right. Most people want to be a part of it. And so what Wurstfest offers is you do get a free ticket in if you volunteer. And so then what you do before your working shift or after, that's up to you. But you do get a free admission into the event. And that has a lot of pull with people because, again, a lot of locals, a lot of new parents who've never had any part in it, and they get to experience it and see things and be a part of something. So there's a little bit different for everyone, but it's very surprising how easy it can be to get people to sign up because again, you are talking about 250 to 270 kids. And hopefully you have multiple parents associated with those kids so that you do have a lot of options when it comes to that.
Well, and we had the opportunity to come down and work Wurstfest with you one day this year, and you guys make it so much fun. That just screams to me, because I think when you make it fun, people want to come and do it. And you've got it organized well, and you've got a great way to give somebody 5 minutes of training, and it's official. There's like 5 minutes of training for each volunteer, and then they're up to speed and they're ready to go. I think that must play a huge role in it too.
I think so. I think not feeling chaotic and also very specific on what they need to handle. Again, I'd like to say one of the reasons it was easier this year in the senses of the flow of the checkout or the point of sale was because of the way Booster Hub was set up with the pictures. I don't know how many people told me, oh my gosh, this is so much easier with these pictures. I know exactly what I'm looking for. It's a hit and go. It's a quick checkout. Because for us, when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, you never want a line because somebody's going to move on to something else. And so processing of people is very essential to getting the sales as high as we can to make the most money for the kids. So I'd love to take credit for that. But Heather and Chad really have fine-tuned how many stations we need. How do we keep it moving? Where is it located? Just really, really put a lot of thought and energy into it and just made it this amazing process. The great part too is it's a way for us to interact with our parents or their relatives in some way. We have grandparents and aunts and uncles and friends that all work it. And so we try to use that as a connection point with each and every one of them. I try to introduce myself to every single one of them. I'm there most days so that there's a visual cue. There's an association to just beyond their kid being in the band. So it's a multi-tier thing, but it's a lot of fun. You're selling stuff. It's nonstop. I mean, you guys know it. It was just go, 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 go. You got to process quick.
I think our CTO prided himself on having no line and doing the most transactions.
Exactly. And you know what? That's the other fun part is we get competitive with each other and we're trying to get the most customers. We're engaging. We're fun. It's an amazing event. And so there's very little that's bad. There's things that happen and life can be challenging, whether it's rain or freezing cold weather or other things that come into play. But for the most part, everybody's there to be happy and to enjoy themselves and to participate and to contribute to the nonprofits, which really help. It's what we all would love, a place where we could all just work and nonprofits can be supported in that way.
Yeah, it's a great plan. And you mentioned something that I think has a lot of value, and not everyone appreciates this, that you introduced yourself as the Booster Club president. I used to laugh because in my days when I was the Booster Club president and I'd sit in the stands at a volleyball game, in every game, someone would come up to me and have a question for me or something like that. And I didn't realize how visible the role was and how important the role was just to be there, just to answer questions, just to acknowledge people from the perspective of the Booster Club. And your point of making sure you introduced yourself to everyone and interacting is huge. People appreciate that.
Yeah. That's the other thing I really tried to institute with this year's board was we wear lanyards, during the marching season or during football games. And I wanted everybody thought it was this whole boasting, I think, in the initial, the board was a little uncomfortable, oh, I'm the vice president and and I was like, no. I want them to know, I want them to read so that if they need to talk to somebody, they know who to go to. They may not know who Bo is or who Tim is or who Jennifer is. And I said, and so I want there to be a visual cue for them so that if they do want to talk to somebody, they know who to talk to. They can see who we are. And that visual presence, I think, is essential because it's also, Robin, anyone who's done any sort of a booster knows that there's a lot of events and a lot of time. And I feel sometimes it gets to be competitive of they're not at all events. They're not doing everything. They're not participating, all of that. And I think it's a way so that everybody does know when we're there or when someone there who can help or who might be in charge. It just kind of gives a line of if there is an issue or if there is a question, who do you go to? And again, it's also for all those young parents, freshmen who are just trying to find their way into this high school world. It's another way for someone to go, hey, can you just answer a few questions for me? Absolutely. How can I help? Because it's a connection to them. So maybe they will come back. Maybe they will volunteer. Maybe they will participate in some way, whether it's donation or volunteer or whatever, just to support the program.
One of the reasons that Booster Hub has profile pictures in it is because of 3 years, I sat next to a woman at all of the sporting events. Our daughters played together. I knew her daughter's name. I knew her husband's name, but I never knew her name. And, after about a year, you can't ask her name. You can't do it.
Wrong, right? It gets hard.
So I was like, we're going to put pictures in so that you can go, oh, that's her. That's the woman I sit to all the time.
Exactly.
And, when you're copied on email lists and you're on chats, you see the name. But unless you're wearing a name tag, you're never quite sure which name goes with which face. So
I guess we start so early. We start in July in the senses of marching preparation and practice and uniforms. I mean, there's just so many parts and it starts so early. And everybody's summer, their time off for a lot of people. I try so hard at every one of those events to introduce myself, to thank them for coming, to please share with others how easy and fun this was, all of those things. Because I think sometimes we all get wrapped up in all we're doing that we don't recognize the sacrifices other people are making for their families to be a part of something. I mean, we know what we're doing and we get to make that choice. But I think sometimes we need to be seen and heard as humans to understand the impact of even 1 hour of writing down names. It has impact. It has a positive impact and it's essential. So really working on the seen and heard for everyone, for every part of it, so that it's valued by everyone because everyone is valuing it.
I can see why you're such an inspiring leader, Jen. You definitely do all the right things. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but in 2020, in addition to COVID, the Wurstfest facility burned down in late 2019. So there was no Wurstfest. No, you weren't on the board at that time, but how did the program manage? I mean, you're going through COVID, the largest fundraiser of the year is not being held. Do you have any idea of some of the things that the program did to cope to get through that year?
Well, I came on at the end of it. So 19 to 20 is when I came on. And so we kind of stepped into it and we're going, what happened? Why is there no money? Where's the money gone? Because they had done a full season prior to, it was the spring. It happened in December of 19. And so it led into 20. And knowing what it wasn't going to happen, but there were so many changes with COVID. The limitations on the band and the productions were everywhere. So the expense was less. We traveled with a half a band to away games if they went, and we had home games. So the expenses were limited as well, which helped. They were a lot more challenging because a lot of places weren't making food or, again, there was a lot of different parts of it, but it was a challenging year. We worked really hard. We created other events to try and supplement as much as we could when we could. You spent a lot of time just trying to see if we could be together.
Yeah.
You couldn't have more than 25 people in a group. So you'd be like, okay, what can 25 people do together that they can support money? So it was a challenging year. And I will tell you, by the next November, when we got it back, everybody had a big sigh of relief. It was a lot of patchwork and, okay, we're going to have to put that off for a little bit. What else can we do? Can we get somebody to sponsor that? There was a lot of creativeness going on, which is essential. Things, you got to have those to know what else is possible because you get stuck in your ruts of what you know to do and what works. So it was an interesting time to be creative as a board to figure out what to do next. But it hurt. There's no doubting how much it hurt. What an interesting part, I think, after that is right after that is when we kind of blew up as a band, meaning he came out of COVID and there were kids coming back or joining that had never thought they would be in the band in high school. So our numbers really grew, which was an awesome outcome of COVID. Was kids wanted to participate in things that they hadn't wanted to participate in before. And so we loved that, but we had to figure out how to supplement as much as we could. So we're always grateful after the 10 days when all that money's in our bank accounts.
And it's hard because it kind of comes mid-season. So you've got to kind of bet on it and then wait for it to happen.
It does. And, we do a lot of planning in the spring in the senses of we prepay for a lot of things like props and uniforms and all the things that have to do with our marching show to spread it out as much as we can. But it's challenging. We have a very large budget. And it's still very challenging. We need to know where every dime, dollar, cent goes and that it's going in the right place. So it's a challenge, but that's what every booster faces. Every booster club is looking for more money to support their program in a better way, in a stronger way, in a more efficient way. So I think it's just the nature of the beast.
You've built some new infrastructure during your leadership period. How was that process? And did you get any resistance? And, how was it to implement?
It's been really challenging in the senses of change. After we came out of COVID, everybody was very, very disjunct. And it was a hard change in that sense because there was a group of seniors that had been doing it one way, and then it was being done a completely different way. And so that change was really hard. And we kind of fumbled through that for a couple of years, but we were using a system, Charms, that was not useful for us. The communication part was good, but no other part of it really functioned for us. The limited access, the lack of reporting and all of that, it just didn't work. So when I decided to bring in Booster Hub last October, everybody thought I was nuts. So everybody's like, wait, what is this? And I was like, well, let me explain it. So we kind of did a soft launch, meaning let's get it going and let's let Jennifer figure it out if it's going to be helpful for us. We'll give it a year is kind of the way that everybody looked at it. And I spent the first couple of months figuring it out, annoying the crud out of you guys because I had so many questions about, I don't understand. I know this works, but I remember there's a way to do this. And I still do that a lot. But there's ways to figure things out. And how does this work? How can we do this? But the massive change came this past summer. That's really when it was implemented because we turned off Charms and we started using Booster Hub 100% with our budgeting, with our store. I mean, you name it, we leaned in and there was a lot of pushback. Everybody was, including the directors of the band, were, I don't think this is going to work. I think it doesn't do this because, again, they had been stuck in their ways of Charms for a very long time. So there was a lot of, okay, well, let's sit down and talk about it. Let's sit down and do this. Let's do this. So there was pushback. I will say they are in now. Even before Wurstfest, this is another example. Chad and Heather Schrader, who run Wurstfest, had used Clover last year. So we got to September and we had a meeting and Heather and Chad both looked at me and said, we're not using Booster Hub for Wurstfest. And I said, okay. I stood there for a minute and then there were two others, Teresa and Michael Bachman. And I'm not calling anybody out because they will totally honor what this is. And they're like, no, we're here to defend that we don't want to do that. And I said, I am here to listen to what you have to say 100%. But here's what you need to know. We're using Booster Hub for Wurstfest. I'm here to listen and I'm here. This is the perfect time. Let's get Robin involved. Let's figure out what we need to change. What needs to happen? What do you need to make this work? But listen, guys, the whole point of this is to be immersed. This is not to have multiple things that we're paying for, that we don't want to spend the money on things we don't need. And so there was a lot of pushback initially. I will say by the time we started, 2/3 were on board, which helped. And so by the time we were done, everybody was convinced, which is good, but it was a struggle because, again, you've got to have somebody leading the charge, right? Because again, we all like things that we know, even if they're not great, at least we know them. We know what to work on. We know what can happen. So the unknown is always scary for everyone, but that's kind of my place. I like to lead into the unknown.
Well, and I think we never want to make the podcast about Booster Hub, but I think in discussion about change, I mean, when you're
100%
talking about turning a ship that's, even if it's going the wrong way, they don't care because it's going, right? It's going, it's moving.
It's still floating, right? It's still floating. It may be half under, but it's still floating.
And sometimes I think like they don't always know the whole picture of like, if we carve off this one piece, like we would have that our coach would do something. And I'm like, every time you use that other tool, I'm losing communication with the parents. I'm losing this, I'm losing that. And so just getting the individual stakeholders to change can be challenging, whether it's moving an entire system or just getting a new product, right?
Yes. Well, and it's just such an interesting, again, having done it through so many different ways. We've done different events using the system. And again, every time everybody's a little gun shy, and I get it, everybody's hesitant. So, but you have to try it. That was my whole main thing. I told everybody, I was like, we're never going to know unless we change. I mean, again, it's just how it works. And I knew this was coming. I knew I was president-elect last year, so I knew being president was coming. And so I knew that one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to make it smoother. I wanted there to be less concerns over the spreading thin of everyone and logistics. I knew that there had to be a better way. And so that's what I knew this year was going to be about. And when you go into that, I'm a stubborn person, but when you go into it with your head down thinking, okay, we just got to stay the path, it's a lot easier when you're making decisions about things in regards to around it, what you're going to do or not going to do, because you know the path,
Right.
either way, we just got to figure it out. The other thing we did do as a big change this past year is we added a bookkeeper. We have a hired bookkeeper that keeps our books for us. We had gotten so large in our budget that it wasn't fair to put that on a parent. We're nominating and electing people who may or may not have a strong treasure background or financial background. They're just looking to help the band. They're looking to fill a spot. And we so appreciate that, but it was creating stress and anxiety for people who that's not the point. And so I hired a bookkeeper, which has been life-changing for us, to be totally honest. It's one of those things where we don't have to worry about it and we don't have to think about it except for provide our receipts and our justifications. And it has made life so much easier in the senses of upkeep and budget presentations and transparency for our members. It's available to them at all times. And there's no question that can't be answered immediately. Whereas before it was, I don't even know what that is. I just know that's something we paid for. Everything is documented. And I think that's an essential part of the change as well, is transparency. You have to be able to let people see every part of it so that they can build their trust their own way. And so that was another essential part, was to step out of that part of it and let the professionals help us with that.
I think that's a brilliant idea. We see so many booster clubs, the finances are just a disaster. And as they move into Booster Hub, we help them transition. But sometimes it's just, you need someone who understands the day-to-day of bookkeeping. It's not necessarily accounting. And it kind of is a different role than the treasurer. The role of the treasurer is really to monitor things and make sure everything's being done. But who's managing those thousands of transactions that are happening? And we try to simplify that in Booster Hub. We have a lot of it automated, but in an organization your size, there's so much money moving in and out that it's such a smart idea to have somebody who that's their job.
And what else we also realized is it needs to be somebody who has nothing to do with band, because she asks questions that make sense that a parent might ask who has nothing to do with band. And so she's able to see a perspective on it that we can't, because we're immersed and we're in it going, oh my gosh, that's a prop thing, that all of our lingo, all of our things, all of our subs and all that. But she's able to go, I just need to know what this is for. And so you have to break it down so that when that parent comes in and goes, I just want to know what this money went to, 100%, let me show you. I can break it out for you in every way to know where the money went, what you paid for, all of those things. Again, I think that's essential for any organization. It's the checks and balances as well. It keeps us all in check. And she has no dog in the fight except for to do her job. So it's just another accountability all around.
I love it. What's your why, Jennifer? Why do you donate time? What do you get out of it?
My why, my 17-year-old he's actually 18. He just turned 18. We call him the gentle giant. He's almost 6'9". He is the most introverted individual you will probably meet on the planet. He struggled to find his place growing up. He was bigger than his teachers when he was in elementary school. So there was this unique part, or this unique opportunity. And when he decided in 6th grade to try out for the trumpet, his world expanded greatly, because there was there was a fine arts, there was a non-book related adventure ahead of him. And when that opportunity came to him and he dove in, we decided at that moment, okay, we're all in. This is our kid. This is what we're going to do. So I do it for the kids. I do it to watch them laugh, enjoy, struggle, run in the rain, be kids, because the adults are here to expand upon that kid experience, that teenager experience, so that they get to be teenagers. They get to connect. They get to find their why. They get to be creative. I tell this story all the time when people ask me about why I spend as much time as I do doing this. And 2 years ago, we have a scholarship that we give out. Actually, we have 3 scholarships that we give out at the end of every year for anyone pursuing music education. And so we have an application process. And 2 years ago, I was lucky enough to be able to read through the applications as one of the monitors, or to figure out the scoring on it. And there were 7 kids who applied. Every essay said, I did not know my place in this world until I started band and I found my people. That right there is a reason I would do anything for those kids, because they find their place, they find their niche, they find their people, as we like to say in band. And there's all sorts of people in band, and they find their all small group of clarinets or whatever. So that's why I do it. I do it for the kids.
Girl, you're making me cry over here.
I know. It's one of those, especially if you knew my middle kid, my 18-year-old, you'd understand that watching him dance in the stands after he wouldn't even stand in the stands because he was embarrassed. And now he's up there teaching the dance and the chants and all of that. I'd do it 100 times over every day.
I love it. Well, the last question that I always like to end with is, did you do a sport or activity in high school? And if so, how did it impact your life?
I grew up in a very small town. I graduated with 28 people in my class. So I was fortunate enough I did everything. I did every sport. I was a cheerleader. I was in one-act play. I was in band. I marched. I did everything. And it's what, in a small town, it's what kept you out of trouble, but it was also what made you a part of something. And I think sometimes as adults, depending on our experiences in school, we can underestimate the impact of that, of being a part of something bigger than yourself, whether it's sports, whether it's fine arts, whether it's ROTC. I don't think there's one thing to be a part of, but something that's beyond yourself in a team sort of relation. I think it's essential for how we show up in the world, because you've got to learn to adjust. You've got to learn to be a part of a team. You've got to learn to be a part of a group or a leader or a follower or maybe both. So for me, it was all essential in how I grew up and where I wanted to be for what was next, because in my high school, I could do everything. So everything was possible going forward. I think that's the other thing for these kids is I think there's some missed opportunities on all of our parts for the kids to have an opportunity to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so that's the part I loved. Every season that changed because it was something new and it was something exciting and it was something fun. So I participated in all of it and I loved every bit of it. I'm glad it's over. I would not go back. Do not get me wrong. I am not living in a fantasy land.
I think the answer of how it impacted your life, it set you up to be a terrific Booster Club president because
there you go.
All the skills, cheerleader, organizer, sports person, running, you've got all the skills.
Years later, it finally came to fruition. Thank goodness.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all this great information. I mean, from Wurstfest all the way through how you run the organization. I think you've provided just a lot of great tips for our listeners and the volunteers out there. And thank you, most importantly, for what you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, like I said, I'm one of many. As everybody knows, anyone who's been a part of a booster or an organization, you're one of so many. And as great as it is to have a leader, it's just as essential to have a follower or somebody to participate. So I think everybody out there doing it, trudging the ground, doing the hard work, doing the crazy, unfun work, it takes the most time. But when everything comes to fruition, even for a second, it's worth it every time.
I love it. Well, thank you. And we'll be seeing you next year at Wurstfest for sure.
We will sign you up now.
Love it.
Thank you.
The Boosted Volunteer is brought to you by Booster Hub. To find out more about Booster Hub and how our app can help you improve communications, increase engagement, raise more money, and manage your Booster Club responsibly, visit www.boosterhub.com. And then make sure to search for Booster Club Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Booster Hub, thanks for listening.